Welcome to Zkast, everyone. I'm Zeus Caravallo from ZK Research, and I want to welcome you all to the Worldwide Tech offices in Washington, D.C. at their Innovation Center. Worldwide Tech and Cisco just hosted a number of U.S. governors here. I think there was 6 all in total, and we talked about a wide variety of issues. And so the event just ended, and I wanted to pick the brains of a couple of experts here to talk about some of the themes they discussed and what that means, I guess, to our society moving forward. So I'm joined by John Evans, who is the Chief Technology Advisor for Worldwide Tech, and Mike Witzman, you are the CTO for Cisco's SLED business, right? And so those are pretty interesting jobs. Obviously, I think public sector struggles sometimes with innovation in this country, and so it's up to folks like yourself to make that happen. Now, one of the pervasive themes across every governor's talk was just skills improvement and digital skills. In fact, Cisco's Chief People, Process, and Purpose Officer, Fran Katsoudas, actually brought that up in her opening, right? Digital skills are incredibly important for the world moving forward. I think one of the areas that got talked about a lot was in the areas of cybersecurity, right? I think the stat that they gave was there are 700,000 cyber jobs in the US alone, right? So now in conjunction with that, we've also seen a lot of headcount reduction. So it's a little bit of a dichotomy here in that we have on one side of the coin, people being laid off and headcount being reduced on the other side of the coin. We need more skills. And so just what are those skills that are needed today? And what's the gap that's here right now?
And I'll start off more broadly, certainly, because that number, as you said, is just cyber and just the U.S. So if you think about broader IT skills, and we even look out to other skills, are people coming into first responder roles? There's a lot of areas around these skills, but we focus in this area of technology. We are going to need more people in these spaces. The future is digital. We're delivering services digitally, and we'll talk about why is that. It takes friction out of the process, no matter what that process is for consuming these very critical government services. Many of these things aren't, and I'll get to it when I get to it. When I need this service, I need it. I need it now. And so we're going to need to bring more people in. We're making big investments into that. Cisco, Fran referenced the Cisco Networking Academy that's trained 18 million people already, and we'll train another 25 in the next 10 years. That's a part of the equation, but we also need to help people shift and reskill and upskill just for the broader workforce in the U.S., not just strictly for government. And so we're seeing a sort of a rise of internships and externships that where we're providing the training for people to make the transition. That job needs to be there to pull them in. I know government is there with open arms, with lots of internships, externships that'll take you from starting point and then give you that real world experience and that training out past that. So reskilling and upskilling is absolutely a piece of the equation. Now on the flip side of that coin is we have to bring technology to, people can only do so much, and we see this, my best example is in contact centers. When we're bringing AI and ML into contact centers around things like unemployment benefits, now all of a sudden we can handle 10 times more of demand, of need when those spikes happen at a tenth of the cost roughly per transaction, per interaction than when we're trying to do it only with people. So we need more people in technology, but we also need to bring technology to help solve the challenge as well.
John, you've got cyber in your blood, right? You've been doing cyber a long time. And it's an interesting question, right? A reporter actually I talked to the other day asked me, with all the headcount reduction in cyber, are businesses putting themselves at risk by having less people? And my argument to that was, on the surface, sure, it looks like that, but it does give the opportunity to rethink security, right? So security historically was a lot of SOC engineers looking at a lot of dashboards, right? How should companies be rethinking their approach to security? You talked about AI, ML in the contact center. What's the role of that in cyber?
So I think that AI and ML definitely play a role there, specific to the question. There's been a big push around automation within the IT space. When you talk about automation specific to the cybersecurity space, they typically call it SOAR, Security Orchestration and Automated Response. By employing some of those SOAR types of tools, you could theoretically reduce your workforce while at the same time maintaining your current levels of security. There are other options, though, also. Just because you're reducing your workforce doesn't necessarily mean that you're reducing your cyber capabilities. You could, in fact, be increasing your cyber capabilities. There's a lot of partners that we work with that offer managed security solutions now. I think you're seeing more of the sort of platform approach in a lot of cases to the cybersecurity environment. You're seeing, it's not that the SIM, you're talking about the analyst sitting in front of the screens, the SIMs are still there. It's just the SIM, pieces of it are able to be more automated, or it's being outsourced to a third party. And when you do that, when you outsource to the third party, then you get a couple benefits too. You get economies of scale because it's not just your organization. You have to have the 2 guys who are dedicated all the time, like you were saying. You can have maybe a few guys who are responsible for multiple environments, multiple agencies. Let's say. But you also could potentially be getting more qualified people. Like we were just saying, there's a shortage of qualified cybersecurity people. I just looked this morning. There's a website that actually tracks how many open cyber jobs there are in the U.S. It says 775,000. So obviously a shortage of cybersecurity people. So sometimes it's very difficult to get those really qualified people. By going with one of those outsourced solutions or a more automated solution, you can both reduce the workload on the people that you have, as well as potentially get some more qualified people.
Yeah, well, I think one of the things that I've noticed too is, every big breach has a lot of media attention focused on it. And it seems that some vendor somewhere says they caught the breach, right? But yet the process is so manual that people miss them, right? And it's hard to even be able to understand how to prioritize all the noise coming in. So I would think that the use of analytics, AI/ML based analytics, actually helps you. The machines can see things that people can't, right? I've heard threat identification being not just needle in a haystack, but needle in a stack of needles, right? And so have you seen that being embraced? Is there some skepticism around AI, though, that, I don't want machines run my environment?
Yeah, I think that there is some skepticism still, but I think it's being embraced, especially in pockets. So if we think about being able to use machines to be able to do things like event correlation across my environment, I think that that's being fairly readily embraced. I think a lot of people are kind of embracing that. People realize that these machines can identify trends or patterns across my environment that could indicate something bad happening much easier than a person could, especially when you've got somebody who may be in your environment having a very long dwell time, who's doing things fairly slowly. It's really hard for an analyst to be able to pick up on all these little things that are happening over months. But a machine could absolutely do that. So I think those types of analytics, and when you talk about things like user behavioral analytics, I think those are becoming much more accepted also.
Like if I log in San Jose in 1 minute and China the next
100%.
Yeah.
It's the Superman effect, right?
Yeah.
Like, you're not Superman. You can't be flying from one to the other in that amount of time. It's impossible. So I think those types are being embraced more. I think where we're still seeing a lot of challenges around people embracing it are those automated technologies that will automatically restrict or shut down access, some of those types of things. I think they still feel more comfortable with having people making sort of the ultimate call in some of those areas because they don't want to impact the workers from doing their jobs. They don't want to get a call, we were talking about governors earlier, they don't want to get a call from the governor's office saying, hey, you stop Health and Human Services from being able to certify people's applications, those sorts of things.
Yeah. Now, Mike, last question here on cyber, and I'll kick it over to you. I've noticed Cisco recently has started using the brand campaign, if it's connected, it's secure, which indicates that we're seeing some convergence of networking and security. Now, this is a trend I've been writing about for the better part of 2 decades, and it hasn't really happened. And it seems more and more, though, when I talk to CISOs and CIOs, there is a lot more focus on bringing those 2 areas together. So why now? Why, after all these years of talking about, why is the convergence of security and networking happening, and what is the role of networking and security?
Well, I think because it's needed. Not to say it wouldn't have been valuable in the past, but it's absolutely needed. I mean, what touches everything? What does everything cross? It crosses the network. And we sort of were able to survive for a long time when the threats were sort of one-dimensional. And you say, well, email's still a critical vector. We just protect the email. Okay, it's this is a critical vector, malware, and then we put something in place. We're sort of like putting our fingers in the dam. Well, now we're at a place where, as John talked about, the threats come in from, they're multidimensional, they morph, and so we're in a place where we still need to protect, we still need to control as much as we can and be ready to respond. But we're in a place now where we have to strengthen the network. We can't just put this sort of hard shell around it and on all the systems. And the technology has moved to a place where we can do that effectively. I won't go into the actual technologies, but the way that would have been done 10 years ago wouldn't have scaled to what we need to now. Now you can centralize policy, force it in a network, and do that segmentation. And any report you read, we just published our security outcomes report here recently, reinforces you could do all these things. You need MFA, you need threat detection, you need response, you need all these things. But consistently segmenting a network and doing that using policy that's around the people and the things, not around the physical topology and the way the network's laid out, has absolutely valuable and is absolutely needed. So people put that under the the umbrella term of zero trust or any number of those using NIST frameworks and others. But that is consistently necessary. The technology is there now to actually allow you to do that at scale.
Yeah, I suppose the easy way to think about it is we live in a world today where everything's connected, from our pets to our cars to our TVs to our corporate networks. And if that's the case, then the network has to play a role in security, right?
Yeah, and I think we're at a place where we owe it in that in the backward sense. If we can't secure it, we're taking a risk by connecting it, and we take that, And when you think about critical infrastructure, that's a vulnerability point. There's a tremendous value in digitizing our critical infrastructure and how you monitor it, maintain it, and operate it. And we have to secure it, or else we're taking a risk on the other side. And we can do that. So we're at a moment where we can take that step forward.
Yeah. Now, another theme that came up was this topic that I'll use the S word, sustainability, right? It's something that every CIO, every business leader I talk to thinks about sustainability now. I just got back from Cisco Live. Amsterdam, obviously being in Europe, big theme, big topic there. I know there's a lot of companies that have set these long-term, net zero goals and things like that, and whether they get there or not is one thing. But what are some things that business leaders and government leaders can do today that can help them incrementally while they're rethinking their long-term plans on how they run things?
I'll start with that one. I'd say leading by example, and I'm seeing this in my space. I work with state, local governments, and also education, so in the K-12 and the higher ed space. And our higher eds are particularly stepping out. They're often large cities or small cities, or sort of micro cities in and of themselves, are making those commitments and starting to take steps in that direction to really assess, what is our footprint, what do we consume, and how do we change that. The technology has come to where anyone who's modernizing their network infrastructure today has the opportunity to think about doing things like PoE lighting, doing building management system integration, and when you go to low voltage lighting, not only do you take out you reduce significantly the amount of copper and wire that's needed to build out, you also dramatically bring down the operating costs, the ongoing electric draw in that, and the savings are significant. So we're seeing, and it's not a full building, it's not I have to start building a new building and I can build that in. We're seeing floor level retrofits for these new collaborative workspaces that are doing this and taking advantage of this. So government has a footprint that they live in and operate out of, universities, schools, so everyone in private industry has an opportunity to rethink their workspaces, what they need to look like in the future, and then do this sort of make this change towards a more lower impact, low voltage infrastructure driven on the
But
network.
even the infrastructure itself, right? I know Cisco spins its own silicon. The latest release is Silicon One. I think I was looking at the data on that. Just between the life cycles of silicon, there's a lot less power draw. I know a lot of your customers are delayed infrastructure upgrades through the pandemic, and now they're running equipment that's 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. And one would think that just, from a feature standpoint, a power utilization standpoint, a space perspective, it's all gotten better, hasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And that story, while it plays across, or that impact plays across all technologies, it's probably most stark in broadband. On there, not only do we have research and development that has taken, basically we're reducing the number of chips required with R&D going into those chips. Fewer chips means less power, tighter footprint, so we're taking up less space, and that is basically the cost of delivering service provider networks. So delivering the broadband digital divide is affected by that. And so when we're able to do that, we're actually bending the cost curve of when we go out to rural or go to inner city. If we bend that cost curve with a more collapsed network with fewer chips in it, lower power draw, now we're changing the cost to operate that, we're changing the cost to the consumer, which now lets us touch way more people than if we were in the legacy model. So you're absolutely right. It plays across all technologies, but especially in broadband, that's playing out in a really big way right now, and Cisco's leading the way in that.
And what are some of the things you've been working on in this area?
So on the sustainability front, WWT has a very deep practice in helping customers to architect their networks, their data centers, and one of the things that we take into account is the sustainability aspects, power consumption, those types of things. Getting it right, I think you both kind of touched on this, getting it right up front is going to pay you dividends in the long run. So making sure that we're architecting for our customers the way that's going to really support their needs from a compute and storage perspective, but also making sure that we're taking into account all of these sustainability, power consumption, the long-term ROI types of considerations also.
Yeah, I've described the path to net zero as being a series of chip shots, not moonshots, right? If you think about, we have to get to net zero, by this date, and I'm going to do it in one big project, I'll never get there. But if I take some of those small steps, like upgrade, maybe my switching infrastructure or the compute, I can take small steps that'll eventually get me there. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a great way to look at it. And I heard somebody say recently, if you've got gear in your environment that's more than 5 years old, you're probably not optimized in terms of your sustainability and your power consumption. So,
yeah, it's interesting that that's eluded corporate tech, because it's obvious just even in your own home technology. You buy a TV today, it uses less power than one 5 years ago, right? But yet in the corporate world, we're still running a lot of old technology out there. So it's a good lesson for anybody watching here to actually inventory your technology and see how old it is, because invariably you're using a lot more power than you need to.
That's a great point.
So, yeah, and so along with that, another theme that came up was really kind of the workforce of the future. I think it's pretty safe to say that hybrid work is here to stay, right? I don't think anybody's going back. But there's an interesting challenge that's happened. I was talking to Fran Katsoudas about this morning. It's like, I know she gets asked by a lot of companies, what does hybrid work look like? And there's no real right answer to that. And I know from a worker standpoint, a lot of people don't believe there's any value to going to the office. Now, your CEO, Chuck Robbins, said on a CNBC interview that you have to make the office a magnet, not a mandate. What exactly does that mean?
Yeah, so we can certainly be more productive, when we take out commutes and we do certain things, sort of take out noise, sort of extra stuff. But then at some point, when you're moving forward and you're trying to move forward with a cohesive team on strategy and things, we find that can be harder. And so we do believe absolutely the future is hybrid, where we're together when we need to, when there's value, but we're not together all the time, because we don't need to be together all the time. We're seeing this play out in a lot of our government customers in different lenses, where some have gone widely virtual and they can source, and hire people from anywhere, because that's sort of possible today.
I never thought that SLED would ever go.
Yeah, and some can't, but some are. And then in some spaces, they're like, no, we're going to have fewer people, but we want them together because we have a lot of strategic decisions to make. We have to be cohesive, and we're seeing value in that. So we'll see people play it, depending on where they are in their life cycle and their maturity and what they're trying to accomplish in different ways. But one statistic I like is 98% of meetings will have one or more remote participants in it. And so to make that effective, we can't come to the lowest common denominator of we're all 1 by 1 inch sort of avatars on a screen. We have to have these workspaces that have native video in them, where the people in the room and the people not in the room are all on equal footing in their ability to share ideas, chime in, and be part of that and be engaged. It comes over to education as well. If we think about the classroom of the future, if it's our educators are at their best when they're in front of a group. But that doesn't mean they have to physically be in front of that group. They just can't be reduced to, again, a 1 by 1 inch pixel. We need these environments where, if I'm teaching advanced French or advanced physics, where I can teach that to students across, several counties, not just to the ones that can physically be brought to the one school that I show up at. And we're seeing more and more, sort of interest in that as we rethink, education based on sort of our learnings from the pandemic.
Yeah, and I know you recently just rebuilt your Penn 1 location in New York, and I think Atlanta's almost done.
Opening that up in a few weeks.
Yeah, and so what's that experience like?
So what's exciting is you see the collaborative technologies right there. You see what different work environments would be, what a classroom might look like in the future, or today. I mean, this isn't even the future. We're talking about like right now, what co-working spaces might look like, huddle spaces, and all these sort of the way work needs to get done here going forward. But you also get all of the environmental and sustainability pieces. So how do we think about the furniture, the layout, the low voltage lighting? Everything's being thought of in that space. So when we bring people through that space, what's fascinating is we tend to bring technology people through because those are CIOs and CISOs. Those are our champions and sponsors. But then they tend to want to come back and bring someone with a facilities to kind of understand that aspect. They want to bring somebody from HR to understand how does this change the way that we operate. And I think with low unemployment for the at least near-term future, and we've lived this for a while, we're all going to be working with fewer people. You talked about that earlier. Are we going to have enough workers to do it the way we used to? Well, we're not. In each agency, in central IT, and private sector, and as a result, HR is looking at how do we bring these technologies into the actual workflows of the way that we do our internal work, the way that we actually interact with citizens. Telehealth, all these things are now at the forefront because now we know they're possible, we know they work. Now people are reimagining, and so what I love about that facility is our IT champions and sponsors then bring those other functions in because they can start to weave that into how they reimagine their elements of the business.
Yeah, and John, I recently visited the WWE Innovation Center in St. Louis, and we're in the DC one. You also have some aspects of in fact, most of the space here is for hybrid work, correct?
Oh yeah. And I mean, just like you were talking about around the group work areas, as long as in Agile, I think they call it like caves and commons. So we've kind of built some of those types of spaces out. This is a great space, and in addition to just some of those thoughtful aspects around the way that the people will work, I think there's a lot of kind of really cool tech here that we have plugged back into things like our Advanced Technology Center back in St. Louis. So, it's a great space.
Yeah, I think the key is to understand what it is you're trying to do. If you got to write a paper or put together a PowerPoint, don't come to the office and do it, right? But if you come to the office, make sure you fill your calendar with meetings, collaborative sessions, things like that. And so I think in a lot of ways we've overthought hybrid work, right? We've tried to make everybody be able to do everything everywhere, but that's not really realistic. There's some things best done at home, and there's some things best done in the office, and use each for both.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you're right. Some of the advantages I get sometimes I come in the office, I don't know that I may be needed to be pulled into some other conversation that's kind of happening. So those are some nice things that every once in a while pop up. But I will say, you were saying that I have a background in cybersecurity, which is true, and the amount of sort of sprawl that we see by having everybody working from home, there are a lot of cybersecurity potential implications there.
The attack surface just went from this big to
huge.
Right,
yeah. I mean, we talked a lot, or we talked a little bit ago about like the Superman effects. There's additional tools that you have to have in place when you've got this many people coming in. It's overwhelming, and you're going to have to go to some of those more automated types of tools in some of those cases also in order to catch any anomalous incidents or sorts of behavior that may be happening on your network. So it all kind of ties together, I think.
Yeah, I think one of the important aspects there to remember too is historically people that work from home were folks like us, pretty tech savvy, knew what you were doing. If your VPN client wasn't working, you could figure out a workaround. Now we're sending people at home. You mentioned call center. Call center agents have never worked from home before, right? Most government workers have never worked from home before, so their ability to troubleshoot their own problems just isn't there, right? So now the one aspect of government I think that didn't really adapt well, I think some people might disagree with me, but through my lens, is education, right? And we talked about the ability in the importance of modernizing skills. I think if you look at STEM data, the U.S. isn't scoring very well anymore. Right, and I think when we sent kids home to learn, we just threw on our favorite collaboration tool, and we had that one-by-one view where a teacher talked to a camera and nobody paid attention. What if we could digitize education? Right, what does that look like?
Yeah, that's a very open-ended question, but I think there's a lot of things that we could be doing better. I think that there's a lot. I think that the remote education aspect actually lends itself to some potential areas of opportunity for us. I think there's a lot of people who viewed it as a negative thing when it was happening, like, oh, they're not going to get the FaceTime with their teachers. The students can just turn off the cameras. They're not going to be as engaged. And maybe some of that's true, but I think there's also a lot of opportunity there. I think there's not this physical barrier anymore to being able to have somebody come in and speak as an expert to your class.
And students love that, right?
Well, yeah.
Astronaut comes in, something, yeah.
100%, yeah. I mean,
a cyber professional.
Well, I was about to say, when I was in grad school, that was something. I was going for a master's in cybersecurity, and when I was in grad school, that was absolutely something I loved. Was being able to interact with some of these people. So I got my. Not very many years ago did I actually get that degree. So I went back to school, but I didn't want you thinking this happened 20 years ago or anything. No, but being able to like we're saying, being able to bring in some of the experts, they love it. Being able to there's a lot of, and if we just think around the IT space, there's a lot of collaborative tools out there around things like I don't need to be in a classroom to be having some hands-on interactive labs, maybe around coding on the cybersecurity side. Maybe we have a capture the flag type of exercise. And I could have that distributed. I don't need to have everyone in the same classroom in order to do that. In fact, it's maybe a more real-world working scenario to have people distributed in some of those cases. So I think that as people get more creative with it, there's actually a lot of opportunity there to do things maybe even better than we were doing it before.
Yeah, it just requires a rethink of
Absolutely.
the educational system.
Yeah. And I always want to give a nod to our educators because they pivoted fast. They were thrown a curveball. We all were. In government.
I think we did them a disservice. We really left it up to the educator to figure out how to use these tools themselves.
Yeah, and they made that move. And I think I'll just add to that we do need to ensure we're moving forward from here and not back. And when I say back to being educators in front of it, because we need facilitated learning. We're learning from thoughtful people who know how to teach, who know how people learn. And if we can, so when I say going back to the classroom, isn't going backward necessarily unless that's all we do. We want to go back to a classroom that's enabled, and we can really draw the power of our educators and really stretch them too as well across to more students. So when we think about rural, when you think about classically, what's the opportunity set? It's what does that school offer locally, and that should not be a barrier anymore.
Yeah, so now you can bring the same level of education to the kid that's in the rural area as what one might find in a highly dense area, right? So the last topic I want to talk about is, and it's related to education in a way because the challenge is the same, is healthcare, right? Every governor talked about mental health, homelessness, right? Trying to improve healthcare, and again, it's an industry that we haven't digitized very well. In fact, a lot of the systems are still separate. I think even just from the aspect of being able to get people mental health care in remote areas, right? Again, same question, like how do we use modern technology to improve those processes?
Yeah, I think for me there's a couple layers to it. There's the digital front door that kind of takes the friction out of just getting there in the first place, because often people have maybe they have a need, but are they actually going and taking care of that need, and are they taking care of it in the most effective way? Are they just showing up at the emergency room when it's super late, or are they hitting that early? So when we do more digital front door type stuff, it just reduces the friction of actually just going and getting the help that people need, and the sooner you get it, the better. And then there's the projecting. There's the what could I do remotely? What could I do? And there's certainly because of the pandemic, there's a greater understanding some of the rules, regulations about you can and can't do this and that, and across state lines and stuff sort of got lowered. And then we saw, hey, this could work. It could actually help us tremendously. So we need to, again, much like education, continue to move forward on that. I'm seeing the investments, I work with a lot of academic medical centers, so we're seeing them invest in the technology piece. We need to continue to reduce the barriers for them to be able to do that and do that at scale with a true lens towards, what are the best outcomes. And I'll share one other thing we're seeing. We're seeing technology brought into prisons as well, which is, you mentioned mental health. It's just one aspect of, we did digitize courtrooms, virtual courtroom. Yeah. We don't need to move prisoners around as much. Getting legal help if they don't have to, move around between prisons or from wherever they are to the prison. Mental health, trained mental health staff, if they can deliver remotely and not need to come in. There's a safety element. There's just a timed element. We take a lot of friction out of the legal process, the physical health process, the mental health process, and everything just happens faster. It happens more economically. It's good for everyone, and so I think we're seeing that that's possible, and we're starting to see organizations really start to adopt that as a holistic philosophy that has a lot of benefits to it.
Now, are people going to trust this though?
So I'd actually like to answer the question slightly differently, but still stay within the realm of digitization and reducing some of the friction that people are kind of feeling. This topic is, and the reason I'm trying to pivot here a little bit, this topic is near and dear to me. The most rewarding 3 years of my career probably were helping the most vulnerable, those citizens that needed health and human services, get access to those services within state government. So this is something I care very, very deeply about, and a lot of it has to do with this topic around digitization, modernization, and reducing friction when they're trying to get access to those services. A lot of people need health and human services benefits or some sort of services from state governments, but when they come in, there's a ton of friction there with trying to get them. There's different processes if you try to do it online versus in person. There's no reason we can't look at those processes and make it much more of a common feel for the constituent when they come in. And then once they're in and they're getting their information put into these different systems to maybe apply for these services, you have to put in the same information in 5 different systems in order to get the benefits that somebody may need. So again, a ton of friction there. There's no reason we can't have these systems modernized and reuse that information, so I don't have to re-enter it five times. Or even if you get somebody who enters their information for one eligibility program, the system could automatically flag and say, hey, based on the information that you've entered, we think you may be eligible for these other programs, things the person may not have even thought of. But these are programs that are really essential to the health and well-being of these citizens. And unfortunately, some of them may not even know that they're eligible or that these systems or that these programs may exist for them. So it was a slight pivot there, but it very much relates to the digital.
No, and it's a good topic too, thing to bring up, and I'm glad you did, because one of the other things the governor said, no one's got any money, right? But you think of the efficiency gains you get from this and how much more budget they could free up, right?
100%. No, you're totally right. There's a lot of ROI on the back end. The other thing I'll say about the money piece is, having lived in this world, I'm very familiar with the budgeting side of it. There's a ton of funding available from the federal government in order to do these modernization types of activities. There's honestly the biggest barrier a lot of times is stakeholders being able to get everyone together and sort of agree on the common data dictionary, the common data governance in order to be able to do this sharing across the different agencies. Like I said, I live this, but the federal government, depending on the types of programs, they'll pay for up to 90% of your health and human services modernization efforts. So maximizing, looking at the ROI, and some of the federal government programs will even pay you up front. They will give you the money up front that you expect to save in the out years in your ROI. So maximizing the federal programs, being able to articulate your ROI, being able to work effectively through the stakeholder challenges. If we could do some of those things, I think we could really move the needle in that space.
All right, so we covered a lot of ground here. Everything from hybrid work to sustainability to mental health. So I want to thank you both for your time. I think the one commonality I took away from all this is infrastructure modernization is important to all these initiatives. In fact, if we don't modernize, we really can't hit any of these goals we want, and along with that comes the opportunity to reskill. And so I hear all the time from IT pros that automation is getting rid of jobs. I think we're creating so many more jobs on the back end that this really shouldn't be a problem anymore. But the key is, if you're watching this, you got to keep your skills up to date, and both companies like WWT and Cisco can help you do that. So if you want to learn more about Cisco, go to cisco.com, and obviously with worldwide technology, it's wwt.com. I'm Zeus Caraval from ZK Research. On behalf of Mike and John, I want to thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time on Zcast.